heard me, but we're SendSprint and we're making it safer and reliable for Africans in the diaspora to send money home. One of our key feature or some of the key features that we have is scheduled payments, sending gifts and money to Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa, and a super fast turnover in just 5 minutes. So what SendSprint does is to connect you with home, make it easier for you to send money and gifts to your family and loved ones back at home in Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, and Ghana. So um, I'm going to continue by introducing our guest for today. Her name is Torera George, and Torera George is a wife, mother, and a lifestyle content creator based in London. She's passionate about intentional living and helping others create a life that is meaningful and beautiful. Torera was born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. She moved to London for love 5 years ago and has made it her home. Her blog, torerageorge.com, is a resource for women who are looking for ideas to make their home more intentional and beautiful. Torera is passionate about making a difference in the world and believes that with the right information, everyone has the power to create a more intentional life. Um, Hi, Torera. We're glad to have you with us. Can you hear me?
Hi, I'm Eunice. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Yes, we're glad to have you. And yes, please, can you tell us, let's start with the why. What was your first inspiration to renovate a home instead of building from scratch? Can you just tell us your journey? Yes.
Okay, so when it got to the time, to buy a house, we kind of looked at the options. One of it was, do we get a new build that we could just move into, or do we renovate our own home? And the truth is, I've always, regardless of where I live, maybe I watched too many home decor and home reno shows. And maybe that's why I was so passionate about wanting to renovate a house, even though I was so naive at the time. I didn't know, what was involved and all the technicalities. I think just putting my spin on a home sounded like such a fascinating idea. And even though my husband is someone who would rather just move into a home that's ready-made, I was enticed by the idea of the full customization of a home and living in it.
Oh wow, that sounds like a good plan. Um, how did you know that that decision was right for you and your family?
I'll be honest, I really didn't know that it was the right decision for me or my family, if I'm being honest. I think it's just something that I desire to do without really knowing, what was involved. And yeah, honestly, and also when we came into this house, even though it didn't look the way it looks now, I
Okay.
looked at it and I kind of saw the diamond in the rough, and I felt so at home here. I remember standing in the garden, even though it was pretty small at the time. I looked at it and I looked at my husband and I was like, this is our home. And he was like, this dump is our home. I don't think so. But I was like, oh, it's actually our home. It just feels right. And I'm very intuitive. So I was like, you know what, I really think that this is the place that we should buy. And he took my advice, which I don't know if I don't know if that was the best decision for us after all.
Oh wow. So coming from the immigrant perspective, how easy was it for you to make that choice? I mean, I'm in Nigeria, and we know how hard it is to build from scratch. Like, especially when you think about, oh, is this the next thing? Coming from the immigrant perspective, how easy was it for you to take that decision? Like, did it just
Okay.
happen?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, so in terms of like how we got there, um, obviously I didn't marry someone who traveled with me or moved here with me. I traveled with, I moved here to meet someone who was already established here.
Oh,
So
okay.
that obviously made things a little bit easier in that sense. But still, there was a challenge of even coming up with, our deposit, which was a
Oh,
huge deal for us at the time, like wanting to get a deposit, wanting to save enough money to get the house. And we had to save and we had to be extremely frugal and we had to be on the same page. So I'll share this. One of the strategies that we took, one of the things we did was I kind of covered, I covered the bills in the house. I covered our rent and our feeding with my salary, and my husband saved his salary. So we were living on just my salary, and my husband was saving his salary. And that was how we were able to get to our goal quickly. Not as quick as some people, but yeah, that was one of the ways that we were able to get to our goal. We had to be very smart, very frugal. We lived way below our means because we just knew that we had a goal and we had something that we wanted to achieve, really. Can you still hear me? Yes, I can. I can hear
well,
you.
hello, can you hear me? Okay. Okay. So after deciding like your first step, what were some core challenges you faced when searching for the actual home?
Oh, all sorts of challenges. First of all, finding the right rate, the right mortgage rate. Because I'm not a citizen, some of the options that were available to us were a lot less than if both of us were citizens. So that was one challenge. The second challenge was actually even getting a house that made sense. Most of the houses that we saw within the budget that we had was very, like, they were really small houses. So that was a challenge as well. Second of all, or third, one of the third challenges was, we were buying right after COVID, when there was still COVID, there was still a bit of lockdown restrictions. So we would go to places, and before we would even get home, the house was off the market. So, so
Oh,
that was obviously very heartbreaking, and we were just tired of viewing houses and viewing homes. Yeah, it was a lot.
oh wow. Nice. That must have been really challenging. In this case, would you say it's helpful to speak with maybe someone who is well established over there, can maybe like help out with getting the right choice?
I don't understand your question fully. Sorry.
Would you say it's, considering the challenges that you faced, would you say it's okay to maybe speak to someone who is well versed with housing in the UK, or maybe just making personal research?
When you say well versed, it's a very tricky one because you could encounter someone who wants to take advantage of you. I would say that the information is out there. Unless you know someone who is really trusted, I would say find the information on your own. Find the information from actually looking, find the information from going out. One of the things that we did actually, and initially my husband did not like, by the way, I feel a bit uncomfortable saying my husband every minute. His name is Charles. Charles he didn't believe that there would be the option that I presented. So let me break that down without taking too much time. So because the houses kept flying off the market and it seemed like we would never find a house. One of the things that I told him, I said, let me tell you, I know that you're going to think that this is a Nigerian mindset, but I can tell you that there are some backdoor dealings going on. He was like, Tori, this is not Nigeria. Don't tell me that there are backdoor dealings going on. I was like, I am telling you, these houses cannot be flying off the market if people are not, if they're not, the agents are not sending the houses directly to certain people that they think will buy it. And he was like, oh, well. So I decided to go with my gut and I called up one of the agents that I felt was a bit serious. I called him up and I said, look, let me tell you, we're first time buyers. There is no chain. So we are willing to pay cash. Like we're willing to spend. So can you, when you find a good place that meets these specs, can you please, sorry about the noise. Can you please call me first? Can you please call me first? And he was like, oh yeah, sure. And I thought it was not going to go anywhere. But guess what? This house, we were actually the only people to view this property because the day before, this house did not even go on the market at all. It didn't go on the market. It didn't go on any website. So I was able to talk to him and he called me and he said, look, there's a house going on the market tomorrow. If you can view it today and you would like to make an offer, we won't put it on the market. And I was like, I told my husband, I was like, oh, Charles, I told him, I was like, look, I told you that this happens. Yeah, so yeah.
Oh wow, that sounds so cool. Okay, so how how much were you both able to save, and how long did it take to put all of that together?
Okay, so I'll say that it took about 3 years for us to
3 years? Wow.
Yes, it took 3 years for us to save for our deposit. And initially we saved 10% of our mortgage. So we saved 10%, and when we got to the market, we found out that they were the only favorable rates, or the only options available was 15%. So even when we thought we were ready to buy a house, we had to go back and save again till we got to 15%. So yeah, we had to save 15%.
Okay. All right. So what were the key mistakes you learned from, all of this and while renovating your home?
Mistakes. Whew. It's a difficult one because I feel like we made so many rookie mistakes that I pray that nobody else has to make. We were very excited, particularly me. I was really excited about the idea of renovating. And I feel like I was heavily reliant on other people as opposed to doing the work myself. That's why when you said, are there people that you can talk to or whatever, I was like, no, do the research yourself. Do the research by going to the people. Do the research by going to the places. Don't rely on anybody. Take everybody's information with a pinch of salt. And it's not because people have bad intentions. Sometimes it just so happens that they don't have as much experience, or they don't have the relevant experience for you. So I feel like one of the big mistakes that we made was not being too, because I was pregnant at the time. I was so ill. I could barely even see my toes. So I was reliant on other people to project manage this renovation. And a lot of mistakes happen in the process because I feel like my husband and I are very we're really on it. We're on the money. So trusting other people is not really the typical way we would operate. But we did that because the circumstance, he was really busy at work. I was pregnant. I couldn't work. So we also moved to the East Midlands. So we were almost 3 hours away from the property. There was no keen supervision. It was a mess. It was a mess. And it wasn't until we kind of took the projects back, and started trying to manage it by ourselves that we kind of gained control of the situation. So yes, it's good to trust people. It's good for people to help, but don't be heavily reliant on other people. That's my advice, because you can make a lot of mistakes by doing that. Nobody has your best interest like you. Nobody loves you like you. Nobody cares about your money like you. Nobody knows the sacrifice that you make for a project like you. Nobody knows the financial sacrifices that you made to even come up with your deposit like you do. Nobody cares about your pocket like you. So yeah.
Oh wow, yeah, that sounds like good advice. Okay, so what would you think people should look out for when it comes to agreements, what to do legally, what are the mistakes or things that people should take note of, especially when it comes to the legal part of owning a home?
I'll be very honest. I'm not qualified to answer that question because I'm not a legal professional. But I would say seek legal counsel wherever you can.
Okay, that sounds very, very, very succinct. And yeah. Okay, so we have some questions coming up, and I'll just be asking them. Someone is asking that is it worth buying your furniture on credit or buying it outrightly?
It depends. I would say it depends on your coming from a Nigerian background, we're not obviously used to the credit system. And it's
Yeah.
taken me a while to get used to that as well. But I would say it depends on your plan. Like, let me give you an example. If your sofa is going to cost you 3,000, 4,000 pounds, I'm just saying as an example, and you know that you're not very liquid, you don't have 2 to 3 times that money in savings, I would say buy it on credit because you need to be liquid at all times. That's what I would say. I don't think you should yeah, I wouldn't advise you to pay outright if you're not very liquid or if that money is going to make you more money in some other way within that space of time that you would have because there's people that do like 0% credit options. So I don't see why you can't make like that work for you. Yeah.
Oh, wow, sounds okay. So someone is asking that can you share insights on location, best locations, worst locations when it comes to housing and finding a home?
Well, the UK is very big, as you know, so I cannot advise on that. But what I will say is obviously consider if you're going to be commuting a lot, like you're going to be commuting to the city or whatever, I would say live a bit closer because what you end up saving in terms of like the cost of the property, you will be spending on transportation. So
Yeah.
consider, like for instance, if you're in London, consider the zone. I would say even pull up a map of London. I'm just saying as an example, or pull up a map of the UK and pull up a map that has the train what's it called, train routes. And I would say do your pinpoints on the train routes. Or another thing you can do is obviously like on these apps where you find homes, you can say you can filter and say you only want to live like 15 miles or 10 miles from this or 10 miles from this station, that sort of thing. I would say that depends. If you're always working from home, you can live further out. But if you're going to be commuting a lot, oof, I would say live as close to the city as you can afford. That's my advice. But take it with a pinch of salt.
Okay. All right. So more people are asking questions, and yeah, this is another question that someone is asking.
Yeah.
Well, I think you've answered it, but let me ask again. This person is asking that did you at any time involve a solicitor through the buying process? If so, what was their role and how much did it cost?
Okay, so in terms of costs, it didn't cost us anything because it came through Charles's office, and that was one of is a work benefits that we got. So we didn't pay anything for the solicitor, but yes, he was the one involved in helping us understand like the process, understand where we were financially and what we were going to be able to afford. He was the one responsible for helping with like showing us the rates that were available with the banks and stuff like that. So yeah, it's obviously a very critical thing, and also he was the one involved in helping us get our agreement in principle. which obviously you need before you start looking for houses. So yeah,
Um,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, thank you for answering. So the next question we have is, what are your top tips on what to look out for when looking for a home to renovate?
My top tips would be number one, look for a house that doesn't need as much structural work. And when I say structural, is the house already extended? Is the house already, is it good enough to move in? Like maybe like the only thing that needs work is the flooring, for instance. Like you just need to change the floor, which will cost you, a good amount of money, but not too much money. But when it comes to like what we did, which was like putting steels and changing the structure, it's just gonna, it can go in whichever direction. So be very careful with that. Buy a house that just needs a bit of a facelift, needs some paint job, needs a little bit here and there. That's what I would say. Yeah, what to look out. Obviously, you want to be able to do your survey. You want to be sure that structurally that house is sound. I'll use an example of my friend who and her husband who were looking for a house at the time, and they were desperate to move in, and they found this beautiful house. It was gorgeous, like it was everything she wanted in a house. And then she went to the kitchen and she stepped on the floor and she found that there was a bit of a creak. So she went into the corner and stepped, was stepping on the floor. And she was like, this doesn't sound good. But they got a survey done, and the survey revealed, wait for it, that the floors had what's it called? There was the floor had rot. There was rot in the floor. Why? Because they didn't have a vent. So like things to look at, little things to look out for. Does the house have a vent at the bottom? Every house should have one. If not, it will cause rot in the floorboards. And that in itself, changing all of that can cost you upwards of £25,000. So
Wow.
yeah, so that's something, there's so many things to look out for, but just make sure that you're buying a house that is structurally sound. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's sound advice. Thank you. Okay, finally, would you do this again? And if yes, what would you do differently?
Sorry,
Can you hear me? I said, if you would do this again, what would you do differently?
um, probably won't get a house that needed this much structural work. Probably wouldn't be as trusting, and I would be more involved with the process. I'm still going to like renovate lots of houses, not houses that I'm going to live in, but for my business. Um,
Okay.
but I will be more careful with like just leaving things to other people. You have to be on top of the process. And if I'm not physically able to, I will know for sure that that's not the right decision at that time.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for that. So we have few people who are, asking questions. Also, please, guys, if you have any question, please just put it in the chat box and we'll get to it. Someone is asking a question now. I think this is for new immigrants. So they are asking that, is it advisable to get someone to share an apartment with when getting to the UK newly to till one finds his or her footing? So I think this person is just asking, like, is it advisable to share?
Like, is water wet?
Well,
Absolutely. Like, why would you want to pay, let's just say your apartment costs of £1,500. I feel like the mindset that a lot of us carry from Nigeria is that you have your own thing, you have your own space. But it actually doesn't make financial sense. My husband did not move into his own flat until about 3 months before I moved to join him. it had a flat share, because how are you going to be able to save money month to month if you're really like determined to live by yourself? It's just financially, I don't think it makes any sense. So and I'm not saying that to I'm not talking down on the decision or the consideration. I'm just saying, like, it's a no-brainer to do that, and you should do it. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Hi, Eunice, are you still there? Hi, Eunice, are you still there?
I think she might be having some internet connection issues. Okay. There's a question here. Tora, are you an interior designer and are you hiring?
Hiring what? I don't understand the question. Hiring? Am I hiring an interior designer?
Okay, hi Eunice.
Right,
Okay, welcome
no.
back. Sorry, I just stepped in there for you just at that point in time. I think she's saying if you're hiring, I don't know, as an intern, Vivian, I think you need to give us some more context on what you have in mind. I guess there's a question around, I guess this is a little bit at the back of the initial question we got from Olushola about arrival. Like, a lot of people are arriving into the UK lately, and I guess if there are any like tips, ideas on how that is, like what to expect, if people are already there, like how to get support for whatever things that they might need, like what are the basic things, I guess, on arrival to keep in mind.
Okay, some things on arrival to keep in mind. I'm trying to think, because I'm very conscious that my experience is very different from other people's experience. It's a very I'm trying to, sorry, give me a second to kind of think of an answer. What's some things to expect on arrival? First of all, if you're arriving from Nigeria, I would say take whatever mindset that you have about the way a system works, about the way things work, and just leave it at the airport. Leave most of it, not your values, but most of the mindsets. I would say leave it at the airport. And when you arrive, I would say moving with the right crowd is very critical, because if you have people who are, and I don't say this to, I want to be sure that I'm not coming off as elitist, or I'm not coming off as rude. But if you're always mingling with people who are always saying, go for that job, 20 pounds a month, like, I want to do this. Like, people who don't dream for more, I don't know how to explain it. Who don't like, you can be in a situation where you don't have loads of money, but you speak like you talk yourself up. You know where you're going. You want to move with people like that, whether they're Nigerian, whether they're from other nationalities. So I think it's important, the mindset. Second of all, save as much as possible. Like, I didn't start buying clothes until like much later, because when I moved here, I knew that I needed to upskill. I knew that I needed to remain, I needed to be relevant in the market. I probably spent about, I would say, 3,000 to 4,000 pounds on education, like on courses, on just learning and trying to better myself. At the time, it looked crazy because everybody was like buying Gucci. But for me, it was just about equipping myself so that I would get to a point where it's Gucci gifting me. Like, that's where I wanted to be. And I think the most important lesson is like mindset, I would say. I think that's a summary of everything I've said.
Oh wow, that sounds really, really good to hear. Can you hear me, Torera? And
I can hear you. I
yes,
can.
thank you very much for that advice. Someone is asking a question, and he's saying that he plans on renting a two-bedroom terrace in Bolton, and apparently, um, okay, let me read what he said word for word. Good evening. I plan on renting a two-bedroom terrace in Bolton, and apparently I understand you need to get processed before you can even get to rent. How would I be able to rent while still in Nigeria? Yes, that's it.
I'll be very honest with you. I once again, this is not my area of expertise because I know that for you to even be able to rent, you're going to need a guarantor, like stuff like that. So I would say maybe speak to someone who's already in the country to help you with that. So yeah, not my area of expertise because I didn't have to. I'm only speaking from personal experience. So I don't want to give advice that isn't relevant to you.
Okay, all right. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you very much. There's another question again that this person is asking, but then I don't think it's. Let me just go ahead to read it out. Okay, this person is also saying, I've read a number of tips to ask before renting. For instance, EPC of the building, if the landlord is registered with a government body for money protection for tenants, renting as a student with dependents, what advices can you give?
I have no clue. I'll be honest. It's not my area of expertise at all.
Can I help sort of break that question down a little bit?
Yeah.
I guess a question to ask is um,
Okay.
vetting the seller or the person that you're renting from. Do you understand? What was
All
that
right.
process like for you?
Okay.
Exactly.
So in terms of for me, I didn't have to go through that process, like I
Okay.
mentioned earlier, because my husband did all of that. I moved into a house that was already rented. So
Mm, so I
I didn't go through that process.
okay. All right.
I'm sorry, and I'm really sorry I can't help there. But yeah.
I don't know if I guess another question to ask is, well, this might be a bit it might be a bit of a reach. It might be a bit of a reach. I was just gonna ask, like, if you have like any, resources around some of the legalities that might be helpful. Because I see a lot of people asking questions around the legalities. I think that's really the part that is a bit off. It's difficult to navigate if you don't have like the expertise that like you did. I don't know if there's any way to sort of say, okay, you know what, why don't you this, I don't know, thing somewhere, read something somewhere that might be helpful.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
The
Fair enough.
legality of this whole process is just not, it's not something I'm like, we had a solicitor who came through the company. So it wasn't something that I had to kind of like research. But I remember that a friend of mine didn't even use someone, he used a body. It's like, if you can Google it, it's like I don't really know what it's called, which is why I didn't want to speak on it because I'm just like, I don't know what to say. There was a body, like it's a body, it's a legal related body that help with that process
Hmm.
without you having to hire someone. And I think it's free, but
Okay.
it's a much longer process. I don't know, I don't know the body, but yeah, that was what he used because he was obviously trying to save a lot of money. So yeah.
Mm, mm. Okay, there's some extra questions here. Somebody saying probably recommending verified vendors. I don't know. Um, then another person is saying thank you for the feedback. Okay, I wanted to ask this question though. Um, Around, you mentioned when you arrived in the UK. We have to wrap up very soon. You mentioned when you arrived in the UK, like you first of all upskilled. But what was the process like for you moving, getting your first job after, trying to learn new skills and things like this? If there's any sort of advice on what that experience was like for you.
Yes, that one I can definitely share in depth. So with getting my first job, I worked at an international company when I was in Nigeria, and I assumed that since this is a globally recognized company, I would easily be able to get a job, which was
Yeah.
not the case for me. And
Oh,
also, I was switching careers. So because I was switching careers, I didn't really know what area or what field I really wanted to land in. So what I did for a while, just to make sure that I was earning money, was I worked as a temp, which is like a temporary worker, um, here in the UK. And I worked in different offices. I kind of saw different things. Like I would cover for people that were on maternity leave. I would cover for people that maybe were off sick, but they needed someone to do that role. So I kind of worked there whilst I tried to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, basically. So eventually I decided that I wanted to work in marketing. And I was like, you know what? I think marketing might be the area that I want to work. So when I decided to move, I started applying to the kind of marketing roles that I wanted. And guess what? Nobody called for me. Nobody wanted to work with me. And I was like, what is happening? Why can't I get a job? Because I was doing like 10 applications a day. I was like, what is happening? Until I figured out that my CV was not tailored to the UK system. So I was like, oh. So I spoke to someone who is an expert on CV writing in the UK. And I found out that there's something called ATS, which I had never heard of before or prior to that, which is the application tracking software, where they put your CV through and they check everything that because nobody can physically go through so many applications. Put my CV through that. What I did, I used the free one online, the ATS software, and it came up that I was in an admin role. Do you understand? So imagine you applying for a marketing role with certain keywords, and the keywords in your CV is coming up as administrative. So that was the first mistake that I made. So I had to change my CV. I had to pay her to help me to write a better CV. And then I passed it through the ATS system again. And this time around, it came up with exactly what I wanted. I revamped my entire LinkedIn. I probably watched over 15 videos on how to do it properly. I wrote a really what I considered at the time a solid LinkedIn profile. I put my experience, I put relevant links. And within a week, I got over 5 recruiters on my case wanting to offer me a job or put me in for certain roles. Within less than a month, I got the job I wanted, and I had several other offers. So I have to say, be careful. ATS, put your CV through an ATS software, check that it's actually the right format, UK format, because if it's not the right format and they put it through the ATS, what's going to happen is it's not going to come up, or it's going to be so disconnected that you're not able to kind of come up as on the short list. So yeah, that was long, but yeah, that I wanted to make sure that I shared that.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your experiences. I think someone is asking one last question. I don't know if we can take it, but this person is just asking that is it best to get a temporary accommodation before bringing his family? Let me read what he's saying. I'm coming in September while my wife and daughter are coming in October. I will stay in a temporary accommodation before they come. Is it best to get there before I start viewing family accommodation?
Let me look at the question again. How best can I get family accommodation? Student coming in September when my wife is coming in October. I'll stay in a temporary accommodation before they come. Is it best to get there? I would say yes. It's best to arrive first.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Because it's harder with it's harder trying to find that because you never know how long it's going to take you.
Okay.
Hi, Eunice. Before we round off, there's a really good question here that I think would be beneficial for everybody to see if we can get a response on. Somebody was also asking if you can provide some resources on the ATS you mentioned. I thought that was a really, really helpful response. I understand getting. So the question is from, I think, Olani Jegede, and the person is asking, I understand getting schools for children may be cumbersome. What advices would you give to get a better experience? For more people have been peddling that people will have to pay per hour for the number of hours the minders have to stay with our kids every day, and it could be very impacting on the finances. I guess they're asking around childcare. If you have any advice on that before we round off.
I'll be honest, childcare is extremely expensive. Extremely expensive. In some places, it's more expensive than other places. I'd say places that have less people or less nurseries or less whatever. You're talking about school, right? So this is a child over the age of 3. I would say apply for any government help that you can get. If you're earning, I think under 50,000, I think they offer a couple of hours. If your child is over 3, there's obviously benefits that you can get for that. It's really hard. It's hard for a lot of people. What some people I've heard do is band together and have someone take care of all their children so that they're all together in the same house and they can save money on that. That's what some people do. They have a nanny that picks them or whatever and takes care of like 5 children at the same time. And it saves a lot of money.
So much money.
I had people that I trusted or someone that I trust and we had a community around. I would take that option as well because it's cheaper. Yeah.
Okay. Time is fast spent. Google ATS software CVs.
Yeah, because you're asking about, it's very easy. There's so many options available. So if you Google ATS software CV, you'll find a couple.
Cool. All right, Eunice, over to you. Please round off. Just go back to mute.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Torera. It was really awesome to, get you to share your experience. So guys, we've come to the end of this webinar. Like we rightly mentioned at the beginning, SendSprint helps you connect with home. You can send money and gifts to your friends and family in Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, and Ghana. If you're in the UK, Canada, you're in the US, if you have family, friends there, please tell them to use SendSprint to send money home. Your first transaction is free when you use the welcome code. Welcome is the code, and the transaction is free. Our top senders get to have a chance to win rewards, cash prizes, gift cards to fashion stores, groceries, and movie tickets, and all of that. Just use SendSprint, and it's the easiest, fastest way to send money home. Yes, and yes, our virtual winners are Loretta Amza and Candy Ajiambo. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. If you're on this call, please send us your email in the chat box. Let us let us have your email, and We're glad that you joined us for today's webinar and that you participated in the giveaway. Thank you for listening. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and even LinkedIn, SendSprint app. And you can log on to www.sendsprint.com to start sending money, sending gifts to your friends and family back at home. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for joining us. Torera George, thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your experience with us. I learned a lot. I know I'm not in the UK yet, but yes, I learned a lot. Thank you.
I'm happy. And I just wanted to ask if there's anybody that, if you want to have any of your questions answered that I wasn't able to answer here, you can always message me on Instagram.
All right. Yes. So Torara George wants you to message her on Instagram. Please go ahead and message her. If you have any questions, please ask. And you can also tag us your questions to at SendSprint app on Instagram and at Torara George on Instagram. Thank you so much, guys. Fermi, I don't know if you have anything to say.
Yeah, I do actually. I raised my arm.
Oh, okay.
So I just want to make sure that the winners are on the call, because if they're not on the call, we'll have to choose new people. So like, can you please just go back? Let's see if there are people there. If there's anybody, if Loretta is on the call, if what's the other person's name?
And I know Loretta.
Loretta and Candy. I don't know if they're here.
I know Loretta.
Okay, but she's not here, is she? Because it's one of the it's one of the what's it called, requirement to be here. So I would much rather find somebody that's actually on the call now and would benefit from it.
No
So the
problem.
vouchers are actually for Tesco and Sainsbury, and it's a £50 voucher that we're giving to two people. So I'm gonna see if I can choose new
Am I
people.
eligible?
No, but we do have something special we're sending to you, so just be on the lookout for that. And then yes, we will be posting this on our YouTube page. So if anybody wants to sort of rewatch this webinar, we'll send it via emails to everybody so that you can go back and, I don't know, pick out what is very important to you from everything that has been shared. I guess before we sorry, people are raising their hands. What's the criteria for winning? I think you had to do something on our social media page and then join the webinar. So yeah, Eunice, I can't remember what the core criteria were, but
Yes.
being
Follow
is one of
us. Follow us
yes.
on Instagram. Retweet. I said retweet. Share the flyer to your stories, and yes, that's basically much all you need to